Hi, welcome to Sylvie's technique vlog. If you guys are new to my technique vlogs, they're literally just my thoughts and experiences of a technique that I'm working on. It's usually something that I've recently learned or something that I learned a long time ago and I'm like kind of coming back to and working on. They're not necessarily instructional. This one definitely will not be demonstrational because I can't really move, but it's just kind of a way to think about technique. I think a lot about technique, and I learned a lot of different things, and sometimes they come back because of something else that I'm working on or learning at that time, and I like to talk about it and think about it. I have a public version, which is shorter, and it just kind of gets to the point, so it's something that you can immediately take and go into your training and use right away. And then I have a much more detailed, much more about my experience and things like this that I offer for my patrons. If you're not yet a patron, you can very easily become one. Click on the link in the description below and you can join there. And you have access to these technique vlogs at the $5 tier. So if you want to see more of those, you can go see those as a patron. And if you're looking at the free version and you enjoy it, you can go look at the playlist on YouTube that has my technique vlogs. All right, so this technique vlog is kind of an elaboration on things that I've learned about feeling your way through techniques. And the reason it's coming back to me now, and the reason why this will not be demonstrational, is that I suffered a really bad injury. It's my worst injury I've ever had about a month ago yesterday, and I've been recovering from that since. So ironically, this did not come from Muay Thai, but it's clearly affecting my Muay Thai because it's an injury to my back, which means that it affects the entire system. Like if you hurt your knee or your finger or your foot, usually you can kind of train around things. But when you hurt the center of your body, like if you tear a ab muscle or hurt your rib, or in my case, I deeply bruised a ligament that basically holds my entire core together, you can't really train around it. Which is really interesting to me because the way that I have to recover and come back to this cannot be going around things, which is what I've done previously when I've broken my hand, my foot, my nose, stitches, you know, anything like this. If I have a pain, I can kind of go around it. And this is kind of a cheat that works. It's worked for me thus far because of the kinds of injuries I've had, but it's not going to work for this one. And I don't put a stamp on anything. Like, you should not, now that I've learned this lesson, I will treat all injuries the way I'm treating this one. And if you have a different injury, you don't have to treat it the way that, you know, whatever works for that injury. But pain teaches you a lot, and injuries teach you a lot. And this one in particular, being as like the entire body as it is, has taught me something really valuable, or has me working on something really valuable about having a more whole body approach to understanding learning and technique and things like this. So if you're trying to learn a particular knee, for example, and it's not quite working, like it doesn't land the way you want it to, it doesn't look the way it looks on your trainer, it doesn't look the way Diesel Noi does it, whatever. Generally we tend to like super isolate that spot and try to fix that spot. So like the knee isn't working, there's something wrong with this knee, let's fix the knee. Or if you're like me and you kick fine, but like in a fight you don't actually kick, you're basically just working around this weakness. Like, okay, I'll get to the point where I can kick well eventually, but in fights I can win fights without the kick, so I'm just going to rely heavily on my knee and my clinching and derning and things like this. That's the kind of like working around an injury thing. And something that I didn't really think about, I think that I knew it, but I didn't really think about until how I'm recovering from this injury, is that in a fight you have to do what works, so you have to rely on what works in a fight. But I never thought about, like, if your kick isn't working, who's not pulling their weight, right? Like, it's not the leg itself, it's not the kick itself, it's that, like, any move, like any technique, requires work from the entire body in order to make it work. And that includes kind of like a mental strategy to how your entire vocabulary as a fighter works. So one of the things I've learned from filming in the Muay Thai library is that the reason I don't get confused by legends or whoever I'm learning from teaching me technique that's different from a technique that I learned from someone else. So for example, Karahat really wants you to lean back on knees. He likes these really long knees, where you lean back, which is from my experience in America and from what I've heard from most people when I made the first video about not leaning back on knees. This is the way that most knees are taught outside of Thailand. And then you have someone like Duuglas-Ittu or Yodkunpan who teaches not to lean back on knees. And so people get this kind of like, well, how do you figure out which to do? Because people are teaching conflicting techniques. And it's not confusing because for the vocabulary, like for the way that Karahat fights, it totally makes sense to lean back on the knee. For the way that a Muay Khao fighter fights, like Yodkunpan or Duuglas-Ittu, it totally makes sense not to lean back on that knee. And so these are examples of how the entire system, the entire body, and not only that, but the style and personality of the fighter themselves is giving context to that particular technique. So you can't train that technique in isolation and have it be this way or that way. You can't be a fighter like Karahat and then decide that you want to do these no lean back knees. Also, maybe you can create your own style, maybe you can do that. But if it's not working for you, it's because you're trying to like mash together these things that are not pulling together the entire system for you. So training something in isolation, and I am a proponent of high repetition, which is training something in isolation, because when you do something in high repetition, it kind of like calibrates or smooths out all of the rough edges. But while you have this like super isolated way of training, you have to then bring it back into the entire system in order to have it not cause problems somewhere else. So this is the kind of cross example to injury that I'm thinking about. So I broke my foot in a fight a few years ago, and you need your feet, like you use your feet a lot. So when my foot was broken, I had to walk in like a kind of different way in order to not hurt myself constantly walking around. I didn't wear a cast or anything like this. I never went to the hospital. It was a very small break, but it took a really, really long time to heal. And this is one of those things where when you're training around something or when you're like getting something to work in the meantime, the way that I had to change my walk in order to compensate for my foot created all kinds of other tendencies and other possibly maladies in order to be able to walk that way. So to me, that's just a trade-off. That's the like, okay, well, I will or won't deal with this later, but it's allowing me to walk right now, so that's fine. This is the kind of thing that happens when like what you're doing is not quite right, but you can kind of like force it into the whole thing. It's very interesting and not something that we're necessarily skilled at to begin with, but is really beneficial to figure out who's not pulling their weight if my kick is not landing the way I want it to. It's not the leg. It's like something else going on with your balance, your standing leg, your arms. Like what is causing this imbalance? What is causing it to not have power? And it's not an innate thing about you. It's not that you as a person can't generate power or anything like this. It's you have to kind of, if it's a class project, I was working with Soshi, who founded Human Movement, and you can find her online. She's a movement coach. She's amazing. We totally think similarly to each other. We speak the same language, so we like geeked out in our session together, like kind of because we think about a lot of the same things. She was saying that when you are working through pain or something like this, you have to figure out, it's like a class project, who's not pulling their weight in the class project? Like, why is this not working out? So I had some revelations about this, and I will talk way more about that in the longer version for my patrons. So if you're a patron, stay tuned and listen to this. If you are watching the shorter version, you're not yet a patron, the lesson that I want you to like chunk out and take away is that isolating a problem or isolating a movement does not actually help you solve it. You're just going to move that problem somewhere else. So the way that you learn from injuries and the way that I'm learning from this injury to like come back is to come back kind of as a whole system instead of just wait until I can do this one movement again, is figuring out how to make all of the movements work together again.